Compression and volume aren't the same. There is a massive difference between crushing a vocal to force it into the mix and automating the volume of it so that it fits in naturally. In this video, I'm going to show both and why they're different, how I think about compression and where I add it in my own tracks. And then at the end, I'll show you a really cool tool I've developed to help do this all for you. I've recently released some videos on volume riding, and I've gotten a lot of comments that are, Maddie, just use a compressor. That's great, but that's not exactly the same thing. Compression affects volume, which I think is why it's so confusing. But actually, it will fundamentally change the waveforms of your audio. Here's the vocal we're working with. I'll play it for you before, and then we'll add a compressor and see how it changes things. Compression sounds different. The volume fade, it changes. Here's that same waveform with the compression printed onto it. But check out the dynamic consistency that's happening between these vocals. You'll notice, especially on these bigger words here and here, you're going to hear it get slammed quite heavily. Compression sounds different. The volume fade, it changes. Compression sounds different. The volume fade, it changes. So that's some basic heavy-handed compression that you might hear on a track. Let's hear what it sounds like with vocal or fader automation. Compression sounds different. The volume fade, it changes. I will bounce this first part down that we've been comparing so that we can get an accurate representation. This time, they're not as visually slammed as the compressor does. There's still some actual life to them. They just had the volume turned down. So what I'll do first is I'll play the compressed version, and then I will play the vocal automation version that I made manually here. Compression sounds different. The volume fade, it changes. Compression sounds different. The volume fade, it changes. The biggest difference that I hope you're hearing is that there is one specifically. Yes, compression can do a good job of automating the entire vocal. What it's really good at is just setting one set of settings, and it will automatically do it over the entire vocal. It is much faster than manually going through and adjusting the gain. However, it takes away some of the energy and life of a real-life vocal performance. When we hear somebody talk or we hear somebody sing, the small, minute details in volume, it can add to the energy of a performance. And that's something I think gets lost in heavily compressed vocals. Compression also can introduce a host of other problems to the mix, one of them being raising the noise floor itself. If I recorded this with a noisy band behind me or in a noisy studio that has a bunch of ground noise or somebody having the weed whacker that's going on outside right now, then adding more compression is going to bring up that noise along with the rest of the vocal signal. That can be super undesirable. And no, I'm definitely not saying that you should completely abandon compression. In fact, I still use it on almost all of my vocals anyway because it serves a very distinct purpose. Here's how I think about adding compression and what I do when I actually want to add it to my vocals. The first thing I'll do is to make sure that my dynamics are fairly consistent, that the biggest peaks here aren't all that different than the smallest valleys. And I'll do that by manual automation, but more often I've been using a tool that I've developed specifically for this task, which I'll get to in a second. And once I do that, I know that I'm then ready for volume. And to save your guys' ears so you don't have to listen to me sing the same phrase over and over again, I'm going to show you a more dynamically consistent recording from the beginning that is going to exemplify this point. Here's the signal that we're working with. Compression ain't the same as when you start to move the fader. And because this is so dynamically consistent, I'm ready to add compression. This won't always be the case. It will depend on your singer and your source and a bunch of different things. But in this case, we're looking pretty good and we're looking like we're ready to add compression. My favorite for vocals is the Studio FET, which is right here. And I will dial this in until I get, I don't know, -5, -10 dBs of gain reduction. And I'll go for a 4:1 ratio. And let's see how this works. Compression ain't the same. Already sounding a little bit more glued together. Let me show you the before and after. Compression ain't the same. Same phrase. Compression ain't the same. You can hear that compressed version sounds a little bit more tight, a little bit more studio ready, and ready to be mixed in the song. I'm not thinking about compression as saving my big volume changes, and I think that's where a lot of beginners get it wrong. I'm using compression as a glue to help it sit better in my mix and to add a little bit of analog color. In this case, the FET I think sounds really good on vocals, but as I was saying before, there's a tool that I've developed to help you make the most out of this volume automation that I think is absolutely essential for the best vocals that you can have. The tool is called magic.RIDE, and it's an automated fader that will do this all for you. It will automatically analyze the phrases in your vocals, like say for example this one, and then adjust them up or down depending on how they hit a target level. Let me show you. So you can see I set my target down here. It's identifying which are too loud and what are not quite loud enough, and will automatically turn them up or down accordingly. And what's even cooler about this is if I go into the latch mode here, turn on latch in Logic, it will automatically write that vocal automation for me. If I then change this back to read, it will read all of the changes, and that means I can go through and manually edit them if I want to. But most of the time, I'm just throwing this on before the compressor, knowing that it's going to do a better job, having the compressor afterwards, and then just being on my merry way so that I don't have to go through and manually edit. You can already hear that that compressor is getting hit way less hard than it was before. Check it out without both, and then we'll check it out with both.
Compression sounds different. The volume faded changes. Compression sounds different. The volume faded changes.
Way more ready for the mix itself and way easier to mix because of the volume consistency. There are other vocal writers out there. This is not the first of its kind. I'm not trying to pretend that it is, but I do think it works a lot differently than most. The main reason being is that if you have this natural knob turned on, it will automatically identify the phrases of your vocal and then adjust them for a much more realistic result. Check this out.
Compression sounds different. The volume faded changes.
You can see that each word is going to be affected as a result of this phrase-based processing rather than each syllable, which might normally happen. In my opinion, it sounds so much more natural and so much better than the other alternatives out there. And that's one of the main reasons I built this in the first place, to replace the other vocal writers, which I just don't feel like do that good of a job. I hope that that clears some of the confusion up on compression versus volume and fader automation. And now that you know the rules, go out and break them. And if you want to speed up your workflow, go check out magic.RIDE in the description below.